afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Staff Sergeant Sabatino Shiri, and we are the historical ensemble of the United States Army Old Guard, Fife, and Drum Corps. It is our pleasure to present a concert for you celebrating works from the 18th century, and the piece that you just heard was written by the composer George Frederick Handel. Handel, of course, was most famous for his operas and oratorios, though he did write a significant number of instrumental works for groups of various sizes. It is true that most music during this era was performed in the church as part of a service. However, it was also performed in homes of wealthy patrons in celebration of various events or private concerts. This is certainly the case for the next piece that you are about to hear. For the same instrumentation, 3 trumpets and timpani, this is music from the court of Kremzer, which would now be considered modern-day Czech Republic. As the Baroque era progressed, so too did the popularity for public concerts. In fact, the growing middle class was the largest audience during these concerts. The growing middle class also offered musicians a wonderful form of income because the really good ones were being paid by the aristocracy. They were being paid to play in the church for all the music that was being written there. And now the middle class was also having music in their homes. So there was quite a bit of income to be made as a professional performing musicians. Good ones, at least. The Baroque flute was an instrument that was ideal for performing in these very intimate settings, given the fact that the Baroque flute possesses a very soft and rich timbre. So I'm going to join my colleagues, Staff Sergeant Deanna Ham and Staff Sergeant Barbie Riskin, in a trio written for 3 flutes by the French composer Philippe Rouge.
Good afternoon, and man, what a beautiful venue for this pop-up concert here. My name is Sergeant First Class Bill Skiba, and the next piece that we're going to perform is an arrangement of music from the opera Rinaldo by George Friedrich Handel, written in 1711, and it was the first Italian-language opera written specifically for the London stage. It's a story of love, war, and redemption. And this arrangement features the duet kind of duking it out with a castrati, but we don't have that, so we have a timpani that will be doing that solo. And that solo will be performed by our very own Staff Sergeant Michael Dillman, back behind me, from the great state of Ohio. So this is an arrangement of music from Handel's opera Rinaldo.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. As I mentioned, we are the historical ensemble from the United States Army Old Guard, Fife, and Drum Corps. You may very well ask yourself, what is a fife? Well, a fife is not a musical instrument. It is, in fact, a signal instrument, and together with the drum and the bugle, were used on the battlefield to give commands to the troops, when to march, when to advance, so on and so forth. By comparison, you see these Baroque instruments that we have are quite refined. This particular one here is the German one-keyed flute, also known as the Traverso Baroque Flute. This one here is a Kremzer model. By comparison, the fife was a very crude instrument. It would have been whittled by whatever materials were made available, perhaps from a piece of wood. Musicians during the Baroque era, they would have been highly educated, highly skilled musicians. Oftentimes, by comparison, the military musicians giving commands on the battlefield were the very young boys or older men who were unable to pick up a gun and fight. We're going to continue along with the more civilian side of music right now, and we're going to be playing a gigue written by another French composer with my colleagues over here in the historical flutes. This one is by the French composer Baumatier, and this was very popular at parties, you see, because at a party one often eats, one often drinks, and one often dances. So please enjoy a gigue, and if you're so inspired, by all means, dance away.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Staff Sergeant Joelle Monroe. The fife drum and the trumpet, as you heard, were used mainly on the battlefield in the 1700s to issue commands from anywhere from when to rise, when to cease fire. These are the trumpets that most likely would have been used. They would have been used mainly on horseback in the cavalry units. You can see they're a very simple tubing. This is a Baroque trumpet that was made as closely to possible as how they would have made them in the 1700s. Even from the composition of the metal to how they have hammered the metal all by hand and how they have put everything together. So this is very similar to what they would have played back then in the military and also in the orchestras. This is the instrument that Bach and Handel would have written for. I'm not sure if any of you have gone to any of the Baroque concerts in the area. They are wonderful. If you ever get a chance, you will see a lot of these instruments and the Baroque flutes as well. One of the really neat things about bringing the musicians over to the colonies in the 1700s is we have one of the earliest known collections of brass music down in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. This was in the Moravian colonies. And there's a really neat account of when General George Washington at the time in 1791 took a tour of the southern states. He was greeted in the town of Winston-Salem by the musicians. So we know this collection of music originated there and was written for brass. So this next arrangement that we're going to play, we like to think some of it might have actually been performed for General George Washington himself. This is an arrangement we have called the Winston-Salem Medley.
Well, thank you once again for coming out and joining us for this wonderful pop-up lunchtime concert here at the Library of Congress. A special thanks goes out to Mr. David Pilar for setting this up and inviting us. We would like to conclude with a medley where you've heard both groups playing separately because there really wasn't a lot of music written for both the flute and the trumpet together, but we're going to arrangement of French music by the composers Moret and Montclair. It's a medley of music we call Suite de la Guerre. And again, thank you for coming. And if you have a couple questions afterwards, I think we might be around just for a couple minutes afterwards. All right, thank you.